Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. Today we are going to learn how to transform historical text and images into an effective, realistic fighting method. Let's start from something important that you need to know. Learning from ancient books isn't the only way to learn how to fight, neither the fastest one, but at the same time it is, in my opinion, the most valuable, meaningful, formative and interesting way of doing it. Learning from ancient books is ideal when you already know the basics of fighting, but it also may teach you how to approach the first steps if you have the patience and consistency of going through the process. It may help developing your critical thinking, your culture, your will and your self-confidence. And that's precisely why I'm here today to drive you into this process. Let's go. Let's start from the most pragmatic aspect. To be able to read the manual properly, you either need to know the language in which it had been wrote, or you either need a good translation of it. The best option is always to approach a manual which is either of your language or of a language that it shares the roots with your own one, ideally, of course. Every manual has pros and cons. For instance, the ones with a lot of text and a few or no images do not create any biased visual ideal you may want to achieve, which is good. But at the same time, they may give you lesser useful hints on how to position yourself before, during or after certain techniques. That said, some manuals are harder to approach, others are easier. If you follow the series of videos on historical manuals I initiated the past week, you will probably know more on the subject in the future. Very good. Let's say you have your manual of choice and you want to approach it. What should you do? Well, first of all, you should casually go through it for the first time. Just read it in its entirety. It may look like a waste of time at the beginning. Do not stop and consider every bit by itself, but believe me, this will help you finding out useful hints in the future. Go through the manual every now and then in this way. It will make you discover correlations between mechanics, terms, techniques, and so on. Once you went through the manual for the first time, it is time to approach the section it matters for you. Most manuals teach multiple weapons, so now it's time to go for the one you want to learn how to use.
The longsword. I want to learn the longsword.
From here you need a training partner, meant to experiment with the stuff you learn from the book and to spar. Having more than one is of course ideal. Now we enter into the actual process of learning, because to be able to distill from the manual what it actually works, you need a method, which is actually what I'm going to give you right now. First step, reading and playing with ideas. Here you have to read a bit of text, be it a single technique or a series of techniques bound together, or a bit of footwork or whatever. Once you read it 2 or 3 times and you have clear in mind what the text says, you start to play around with your sword and footwork. You can do it alone at first, to play around with what you think should be the movement you think would work. And then after it you can move forward and try out with your friends. Which is the second step. Try out the idea with your friends, of course. Start slowly and explain your idea to your friends at first. Ask them what they think about it, especially if you have the same level of experience or if they have more. Hear what they have to say and then try out your idea at speed with some equipment. Here you have to pay attention to what your partner is doing. Sometimes training partners try to make your technique fail even without noticing. If this happens, tell them, because probably they are not making it on purpose. If your technique fails even when the partner is cooperating and doing what the ideal condition explained on the book tells them to do, well, it is time to rethink your idea and change for something better. If it works, you can move to step 3. Step 3 is sparring. Making your action work in a non-collaborative environment is the mark of quality of your action. But you also have to consider a couple of things before doing it. Managing to land the action on your training partners may be very hard if you had just went over it in training. So don't instantly try to test if it works or not. Do it after a week or 2. Another thing that you have to remember is that when you are experienced enough, it gets easier and easier to fence with your friends and clubmates. Fencing is a language, and as we know how our friends behave verbally, we also get to know how they behave fencing-wise. This means that the best test of quality of your action is to land it against fencers that you don't know very well. Step 4 is, now that you started your experimentation process, it is time to check on the internet for info about other interpretations, or for modern books about that specific master. Now, if you are a complete beginner and you are without a club, this should be part of step 1, of course. But if you have a club or a group of friends with which you are practicing with and you have enough fighting experience under your belt, this should happen as a step 4. This is because even if the manuals, or at least a number of them, had been already studied and interpreted multiple times, there is still chance to discover something by yourself. Reading other people's ideas on the subject may redirect your thoughts in a predetermined direction, which may definitely be very good, but still it will partially spoil you from the chance of putting your own ideas into it. The fifth and the last step is to find coherency. Most manuals are organized as a system, which means that every technique, every movement is part of a greater defensive and offensive scheme. Once you are enough into your manual and you're able to land a decent amount of its actions, it is time to look at it by a systemic perspective. It is time to search for connections from one action to another, from guards to plays, and from footwork to technique and tactics. Here is where your experience as a fencer will get more and more important. In fact, the more you move from step 1 to step 5, the more observation and empiricism become important. You need to be able to observe the fight and understand what the fight asks from you. This same question should be redirected to the manual. For instance, the fight asks me to be able to cover the outside line after my opponent does this or that. What in the manual answers to this problem? At this point, you will go through the things that you already understand, and if you don't find a solution, you will go through the things that you don't understand, and you will eventually find something. Here you are at a new level of your work. The problem isn't anymore how to make an action work, but it's how to solve the problems you have during a fight with the tools of the manual, the tools that the manual is giving to you. Here is where you will really put the manual into practice. The more you will move forward, the more you will be able to connect all these things, techniques, tactics, footwork. You will do it by observation, by study, by reading, by putting in practice and into question sometimes. That said, during this process you may incur in some problems, which I am going to list here briefly so that you are aware of them and you will be able to deal with them properly. The first one is symbols and allegories. Now, especially in medieval manuals, there is a component of symbolic and allegorical messages which is sometimes extremely important to unlock the manual. So be ready to read through these also. Sometimes posing yourself the right question will let you find out where these allegories are and what they actually mean. It is not easy to give an advice on this subject. It is something that just happens at some point. Number 2 is zealotry. If the manual says that an action is meant to counter a downward cut from the right, for instance, there are two options. Either it is specific to solve that problem, which of course may be the case, or it may also deal with other actions too, but the lack of space and the cost of writing more about the subject didn't make it possible for the writer to expand on it. This thing is true especially in manuscripts. So, if on one side you have to always remember what the manual says, and you have to follow its advice, at the same time you have to question it and try out the same action in other contexts. Don't be a zealot. Number 3 is pay attention to not bend reality. Sometimes, to make the manual work, people create weird training environments, rules, myths, and any sort of thing to justify their weird, inapplicable interpretations. My advice is, do not be that person. Remember, our fencing environment is not the same thing as a fight with sharp swords. But neither was the training back then. Everyone had to approximate in training. Keep this in mind. In fact, it is better to understand what training asks and asked for back then, rather than fighting. That may be the key for many discoveries. Stick to what the manual says and to empiricism, and everything will be fine. Very good. Now you should be ready to approach your manual. Remember, it is a process, slow, steady, and full of key moments in which you will unlock many parts of it at a sudden. It isn't consuming, which is what society teaches us to do for the most part. It is researching, shaping, like a sculptor who frees the statue from its prison of stone. Do not rush, be consistent, and you will succeed. Very good, people. I hope you will find this video useful in some way. Remember to check my Patreon link in the description, because it is the only way in which this channel keeps going forward. Thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.